Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Parim Siva, Sport Dietitian from SSI. We have come to the last two sessions of the day, and I'm happy to introduce our next speaker, our dear colleague, Liyan, Sport Dietitian with the Singapore Sports Institute. Liyan works with athletes from badminton, table tennis, bowling, gymnastics, synchronized swimming, and diving, providing them with a team-based and individual nutrition support and guidance. Working with mostly indoor athletes, her research interest is in vitamin D and its impact on health and sports performance. She also has special interest in working with aesthetic athletes, focusing on carbohydrate periodization for weight loss. Due to her involvement in aesthetic sports, she set up a screening program aimed at identifying athletes at risk of developing conditions related to low energy availability. Liyan holds a bachelor degree in food science and technology, a master's degree in nutrition and dietetics, and a postgraduate diploma in sports nutrition from the International Olympic Committee. She's also a level 1 ISAK certified. I'm pleased to have Liyan here to share with us the untangling challenges of the athlete, a nutrition perspective. Please give her a warm welcome as she joins us. Liyan.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I trust that you've been enjoying the presentation so far. As introduced, my name is Liyan and I'm a dietitian with the SSI. And today I'm presenting on untangling the challenges of the athlete, a nutrition perspective. Basically, I'm going to share about the case study of one of our Olympic Games qualifiers, the challenges she faced as an athlete during this COVID-19 era, the support that we have provided to her and are still providing, especially in the area of nutrition. So today's menu, I'm going to talk about the challenges that she faced, what support the multidisciplinary team can provide. So just not to provide any spoilers, we'll just talk about the management of each challenge that she faced. And because our athlete in question is a gymnast, it's important to talk about low energy availability because that's a very common challenge among aesthetic athletes. And I'll finish off with the road ahead. So the challenges. To describe COVID-19 as disruptive is really an understatement. The virus has brought about world-changing practices, and athletes are not spared from the impact of the virus. Because of the health threat of the virus, governments around the world, well, most, took measures to protect their people from getting the infection. So Singapore was no exception. Singapore introduced the circuit breaker in April, and this means that training for all athletes had to be modified to be home-based. So for the gymnast, it means lack of apparatus training, change in training load and intensity, as well as the subsequent return to sport. So with the uncertainty of a cure in sight, the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games was postponed to 2021. This we all know. But this is actually an unprecedented move since the opening of the first modern Olympic Games in 1896. So for the curious minds out there, Olympics has only been cancelled 3 times due to World War I and World War II. As in my search, it's never been postponed. And for most of us, participating in the Olympic Games is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. So postponing or cancelling can be quite a huge mental blow to an athlete. Because of COVID-19, the athlete who holds a scholarship from a prestigious university from the USA has decided to stay in Singapore and attend classes from home. For most of our university athletes, this arrangement would have been manageable. But for our athlete, this would mean that she has to attend classes online, but following the US time zone. So being an aesthetic athlete in Singapore being an aesthetic athlete in general is already very challenging in normal times because of the need to maintain body comp. But during COVID is even more challenging. So how many of us actually put on weight during COVID? One of the key reasons for gaining weight is the loss of incidental movement. So if you think about it, we actually don't walk so much to catch public transport, for example. Even the number of steps to take when you are at home to go toilet versus when you are outside is much less. So imagine if you go toilet 10 times a day, you're actually walking 10 times less than usual. The other reason for gaining weight could be boredom eating. Again, how many of us actually walk to the fridge more often than usual just to see what's in the fridge, even though we're not really hungry? Okay, so another challenge for our athletes is injury management. So injuries are no strangers to athletes. So this is a quiet year that for most overuse injuries to heal, but also new injuries may start to manifest with different training that is brought about by COVID, the home-based training. Nutrition, also a challenge for our athlete, largely due to our environment and our society, which I will elaborate more later. So thankfully, this athlete is not alone in her sporting quest. As the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village or an ecosystem to build an athlete. So supporting this athlete, we have a sports science and medicine team, including a medical doctor and physiotherapist to oversee injury management and safe return to sport. The physios, of course, help to manage her injuries and rehab. We also have a physiologist who helps with her tracking of her body condition for the training that she has to go through. We have S&C coaches that helps with building strength and fitness. A psychologist to help with the mysteries of the mind. Dietitian, yours truly, to assist with her intake, and full support of the coach and NSA in managing and overseeing specific training for our athlete. So we also have fortnightly meetings among this team so that we can update one another on things that are happening to the athlete, like when she's going for surgery, when she's doing what are rehab, and how her mental conditions are, so that we all know how best to manage them within our own specialties. So, as mentioned, because of the circuit breaker, we will need a periodized return to training. The circuit breaker was a difficult period for all our athletes because of the disruption to training. So imagine a swimmer who cannot swim in water, a bowler who cannot knock down pins in the bowling lanes, or a table tennis athlete who has to spar against the wall. So for our gymnast, the lack of apparatus training can be dangerous upon return to training. So imagine if she's on the beam or on the bars and she falls off, it can cause injury. Unfortunately for us, our muscle functions are either use it or lose it. So circuit breaker actually results in a large reduction in the training load and volume. So the impact is we need a periodized return to training. So when phase 2 started, our medical doctor came and discussed the return to training plan. So at the beginning of phase 2, training load just to increase a little bit. And we have return to training phase 2, where we get them to train a little bit more while monitoring their loads and their responses to the increase in training intensity. And then after many weeks, then we go through this return to training phase 3, where we are looking at athletes performing, but still not at where they were prior to circuit breaker. And finally, the competition phase, where they go back to what their usual standards were. So for the nutrition management of this return to training, cliche as it may sound, is really about periodizing their intake according to their training load. So during circuit breaker and the initial phases, training load is still relatively, not relatively, but it's low. So we're looking at lower carbohydrate intake and fat intake. And then only when they are training more, like in the phase 3 or pre-competition stage, is where their usual intake returns. So in terms of injury management, our athlete has got a long-standing wrist injury that was largely managed through physiotherapy. However, due to Olympic Games postponing and the potentially long months ahead because of the lack of competitions, it was deemed as a good opportunity for her to undergo surgery to repair the broken wrist. So then, what can be worse than the surgery to repair a broken wrist? The answer is 2 surgeries to repair 2 broken wrists. So our athlete actually went through 2 surgeries with a double cast on both her hands. And the impact was that it took time away from training. She has to spend more time on rehab to gain back some of the muscle functions. And with less training, it gives the athlete more time to think about, to obsess about weight and body comp. Nutrition management. So the principles of nutrition for recovery and rehab follows. Again, continued periodized intake and ensuring that she has enough BCAAs, branched-chain amino acid, basically mainly leucine, to help to minimize any muscle loss from the inactivity resulting from surgery. We also ensured that she took in sufficient vitamin C that is needed for wound healing and the formation of collagen. And we also made sure she had more omega-3 fatty acids that is anti-inflammatory in nature. For her academic challenge, as mentioned, our athlete here is studying in the US, a university in the US that is 15 hours behind of Singapore. So much as she would like to give herself more time to train leading up to Olympics, she has already taken a gap year in the academic year 2019 to 2020. So to ask her to take another gap year might be too much to ask for. So she decided to go back to uni for this academic year. So she's based in Singapore, but because of the chaotic situation in the US and her recovery from the surgeries, she has made the decision to stay in Singapore to attend classes virtually. However, because of this time zone, we are 15 hours behind. The impact is that it affects sleep or lack of sleep. It impacts her social life, because how do you interact with others when everyone is asleep? And it increases the risk of injury when she is exercising or training. So the resultant is a disruption in circadian rhythm. So all of us has a body clock that responds to sunrise and sunset. And that's what we call the circadian rhythm. So melatonin is a sleep hormone, and it decreases with sunlight exposure. So as you can see, at 7:30, when the sun has risen, that's when our body's melatonin secretion starts to drop. And then as we go through the day, we have a heightened alertness, better coordination, reaction time, etc. till the evening when the sun sets, and that's where melatonin starts to secrete again, and that's when we feel sleepy. And then by midnight we fall asleep, and deeper sleep is around 2 a.m. And then we sleep till the sunrise again. Our alertness, our mental alertness, also fluctuates according to time of the day. So in the morning, we are more alert for most of us. And then we experience a dip in our alertness in the mid-afternoon, sometimes also known as the post-lunch syndrome, before alertness rises again towards the evening and late afternoon to evening. So what the athlete is experiencing is she is going against natural circadian rhythm. So her new wake time is our 12 midnight. So that is her 8 a.m. So she will wake up and go straight to classes. And what this means, without the sun to wake her up, is a wake inertia. So she will find that it's quite difficult to wake up. And then her new training time is around 9 a.m., which is her around 3 p.m. So this actually coincides with the dip in alertness. So this poses like an increased risk of injury. So in case you're wondering why doesn't she train earlier or later, it's because if she trains earlier, her training time really depends on the availability of the coaches. So it's very hard to get the rest to, train her at 7 a.m., for example. And then we don't want her to train later, because if it's too late, it may affect her sleep. So her new training time is kind of at an awkward time, but that was the best that we could come up with. Her new bedtime, her 11-ish hour, 3 to 4 p.m., is actually very bright and very hot. So the resultant is sleep inertia, so she might take a longer time to fall asleep. And not only that, it may affect her sleep quality, and there's long-term impact on her health and her mental wellness as well. So what we did to help was that we helped to plan for optimal sleep-wake times. based on the constraints that we have, as I already mentioned. The use of blue light. So before sleep, we requested that she avoided blue light. So turning off the blue lights on devices like our phones and monitors, modern monitors. The older monitors might be a bit difficult, or to wear the blue light lenses, and then use blue light when she wakes up. So there are special lights that emit more blue light. So when she wakes up and she turns on the lamp, it actually wakes her up a little bit more. We use sleep monitoring devices such as an activity tracker to track her sleep quality and quantity. Then we use this data to troubleshoot sleep issues lah. And also, if with the data, we can update our sports science team so that training can be modulated based on how she's sleeping and how she's feeling. Nutrition management, so helping her to plan her breakfast, lunch, and dinner, new breakfast, lunch, dinner times. Appropriate use of caffeine. So, like most of us, if you find that you have problem waking up, a cup of coffee can do the trick. But for her, the cutoff time that she should not drink any coffee, otherwise it will interfere with her sleep. Timing of carbohydrate intake around training and exercise. So we don't want her to eat a large carbohydrate meal prior to her bedtime, otherwise it will affect her sleep. The use of sleep aids like melatonin to help her fall asleep, and for example, Cherry Active to help her improve her sleep quality. And lastly, meal company. I'm not sure how many times it happened, but it's really important for us to have social interactions during meal times, like for our social and mental well-being, to eat with others. And of course, as with every gymnast, we have the weighty issue. A quick search on the internet and you can find many articles, especially of recent times, where aesthetic athletes come out to share that the emotional abuse that they went through because of their weight lah. This is largely because aesthetic sport athletes have a subjective scoring component. As much as the sports have minimized the impact of the aesthetic element, for example, there's no overall impression score, athletes are still judged on how they look, especially so in aesthetic sports, because they wear less clothing. There's less clothing coverage, basically. So if you've been following the plot here, you would know that our athlete here has just had surgery to both her wrists. The resulting effect is that it has drastically reduced her training load. She's studying and following the USA time zone, so she's not exactly sleeping well, eating well. And the history and culture around aesthetic sport and the need to be lean. So our athlete here thinks that she has issues with her weight, although in reality she really does not. So it could be her perfectionist mentality, impression of an ideal gymnast body type, but she's definitely at risk of what we call low energy availability. So even the most confident females that I've worked with, once we talk about their weight, some may feel, I feel that there's a bit of like they lose their confidence. So the resultant high risk of energy availability, not just our athlete here, but most aesthetic sport athletes. So nutrition management, the first one is of course no weighing policy, because weight is just a poor indicator of body composition. Weight is basically just the impact of gravity pulling on the body. And weight is something that fluctuates very easily. Something for all of you to ponder about. So if you drink a liter of water within 5 minutes, do you put on 1 kg of weight after 5 minutes? So if you're interested to find out the answer, try it yourself. Okay. For nutrition management for the athlete also means that we track her menstrual cycle, her menstrual status. So very often, one of the first symptoms of low energy availability is disruption to menstrual status. Again, we keep talking about periodizing their intake. So we look at quality and type of carbohydrate intake as well. Especially, we want to make sure that our gymnast here eats less refined carbs outside of training. It's more slow release carbs outside of training. And ensuring that she has sufficient protein intake for muscle building, muscle repair, and making sure that she has a variety of food intake for vitamins and mineral intake. And because of the impact of low energy availability on athletes, I think it's important that we spend some time talking about it. Here is the mathematical definition of low energy availability. Basically, it's just the energy you consume minus the exercise energy expenditure divided by a fat-free mass. So there is an optimal amount and there's a minimum amount. Under the minimum amount, you're likely to experience medical conditions. But in layman's term, basically what it means is that when your energy is used for one function, such as exercise, it is not available to use for something else. So you cannot use energy for two functions. Okay, and low energy availability is defined when the body does not get sufficient energy to support all the physiological functions that is necessary to maintain optimal health. So some of you may be wondering, what's the difference between energy balance and energy availability? Can someone who is weight stable be in low energy availability? So there is a misconception by many that if your weight is stable, your weight is maintained, it means you're in energy balance and therefore you have enough energy intake. But that is not true, of course. Weight stable does not mean that you will have sufficient or optimal energy availability. So as you can see from this balance here, as physical activity increases, and the amount of food and drink intake maintains the same, which means that you're in energy balance, something has to go, and that something is basic metabolism. So without an increase in energy intake, your basic metabolism, meaning the amount of energy needed to breathe, needed for your heart to beat, and basic body functions, it can decrease. So with that decreasing, your weight can be maintained. Okay, so because of this, in 2007, a term called the female athlete triad was developed to describe the interrelationship among this low energy availability with or without eating disorder, with menstrual dysfunction and decreased bone mineral density. Basically, what it means is that if your energy intake is not enough, it may affect your menstrual cycle and it may affect your bones, the bone health. If the low energy availability, like if the insufficient intake affects menstrual cycle disruption to your menstrual cycle may further impact your bone. So it's the relationship between these three lah. But you don't have to be affected by all three to be classified having the triad, because as long as you have one or two components or anywhere along the spectrum of these, you will experience some changes lah. I personally don't quite like the term female athlete triad because the acronym is FAT. So for an athlete who is really struggling with energy intake, labeling them fat is not the best thing to say also. So also the scientists have found that it doesn't just affect females. Although less common, the effects of low energy availability also affect males. This is especially so among athletes participating in endurance events where being lightweight is an advantage. So if you look at the Tour de France cyclists or a long distance runner on the pictures. So being big and tall males may also experience low energy availability simply because they need so much energy for their training. So back in 2008, there was an article about Michael Phelps consuming 12,000 kilocalories a day when he was training for the Beijing Olympics. Although I find that a personal exaggeration, big athletes do have higher energy needs compared to a normal male adult. So I think Phelps at that time was easily burning through 8,000 kilocalories a day, which is about 3 times more than energy requirements of an average adult. Like Peter Crouch here in this picture, he's 2 meters tall, 75 kg. He also probably can easily burn 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day while he's training. And it's not just the Westerners. Our local athletes, like our beach volleyballers here, they are towering at 1.9 meters, and they are also at high risk of LEA simply because the energy requirements are so high. So in 2015, the International Olympic Committee developed yet another term called the relative energy deficiency in sport, also known as RED-S, describe this condition of LEA affecting both female and male athletes of all levels and of all ages. I find that this is a better term as well. So this term encompasses the wide-ranging adverse effects that LEA has on the body systems, more than just bone and menstrual function. So as you can see here, it affects the immune function as well, immunological functions, the gastro functions, psychological functions, growth, and endocrine. So other than health impact, it also has the potential to affect your sporting performance, including a high risk of injury, especially bone injury, your endurance performance, strength performance, concentration, coordination, and things like that. So then the question is, what causes low energy availability? It can be increased intake, increased output, or decreased intake, or a combination of both. For increasing output, like excessive output, I find that it's more common when athletes transit from teams. So like if you have a junior athlete that is moving towards the senior squad or just transferred to the senior squad, is at higher risk because of the different training load and training intensity, or also quite common at the beginning of a training season or a sporting season. So for some athletes, they tend to eat more during the off season, like for example December, there's Christmas binging and all that. So when they come back, they're full of enthusiasm to want to burn it off. So they train very hard and at the same time eat very little, and that puts them at risk of developing the condition. As for insufficient intake, there are so many factors. There's the sociological as well as the psychosocial and behavioral. So I find that for the sociological reasons, Asian society values thinness a little bit more than Western societies. So our culture is not quite forgiving if you're not, I guess, not thin. Family, I don't think it's like the family pressuring the athlete to be lean, but it's more like if you have very lean parents or very lean siblings, and if the athlete in question is not lean, they have the unspoken pressure to try to look like a family, like try to look uniform to their parents and siblings. Coach and sport demands, I find this is one of the main factors. Usually when I see an athlete who has got drastic weight loss, who develops symptoms, is usually because coaches said something to them. It doesn't have to be an aesthetic sport. So I have experienced athletes from non-aesthetic sport where the coach just said something like, wow, you still have that chubby cheeks lah, or recently very round lah, things like that. It triggers athletes quite a bit, especially when it comes from somebody of authority like a coach. So for the coaches out there, please be very mindful of what you say, especially to adolescent, teenage athletes, because they can be very impressionable. Other factors like economic status. So we do have athletes who do not have enough money to eat. So we have, I've heard of an athlete who only has got a $5 budget per day for food. So that's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So for somebody with a high energy requirement, asking them to eat a $1 breakfast, $2 lunch and dinner is almost impossible to meet their requirements. And education and work commitment. So a lot of our athletes work and study and train part-time. So they just don't have enough time to eat. So I have an athlete who trains from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., works the rest of the day, coaching and other freelance work, and train again and have a second training session in the evening. So with such time, without time and without the energy, they just don't have the appetite to eat and don't have the time to eat. Psychosocial and behavioral factors, of course, the diet and exercise motivation. So recently there's been fat diets like plant-based diet. So not that plant-based is no good. Plant-based is good. There's nothing wrong with eating more fruits and vegetables. It's just that if you have a very high calorie demand, having so much food, having so much plants and fiber, you won't eat enough. Basically, you feel so full with so much fiber that you can't eat enough calories. Of course, there's the body image and drive for thinness, the perfectionism characteristics, self-confidence. Maybe just having a certain body composition makes an athlete feel more self-confident, and then they have this drive towards a particular body comp, and of course disordered eating behaviors. So low energy availability on sports performance. So I'm just going to share with you a couple of studies that measured this. So this study was done in junior elite female swimmers, and they showed that ovarian suppression can impair sport performance. Basically, what this study did was that it compared a group of swimmers over a 12-week period, and then they measured things like their female hormones, their endocrine hormones, their menstrual cycle, body comp, RMR, which is resting metabolic rate, how much they're eating, how much they're expending, and a 400-meter swim performance. So based on their menstrual cycle information as well as their female hormones, they classified the swimmers into two groups. One group that is regular menstrual function. The other group is what we call ovarian suppressed, which means they have altered menstrual function, like impaired menstrual function. So what they found was that at the end of the 12-week period, the group with regular menses showed an 8% improvement in their swim velocity, whereas the group with ovarian suppression, they showed a close to 10% decline in their swim velocity. So if you take the two together, comparing regular menses versus impaired menses, the difference in their speed is close to 20%. On neuromuscular performance, this group was done in Sweden and Denmark, if I'm not wrong. They found that athletes with amenorrhea, meaning that they don't have menses for a while, had poorer muscle function outcomes. So again, this study recruited two groups of athletes who are eumenoric, meaning that they have regular menses, and amenorrheic from the national teams. So they basically measured their RMR, fed them a standardized breakfast, made them exercise to exhaustion, measured their reaction time on a computer application, computer program, and then measured their knee muscle strength and muscle endurance. The authors found that with the amenorrheic group, they not only have lowered RMR, they have slower reaction time, and they have poorer muscle strength and muscle endurance. Okay, so low energy availability does affect sporting performance. A quick search on low energy availability and injuries, you will find that there are so many, largely because of the impact of low energy availability on bone health of athletes. And moving on to the last challenge for our athlete, the nutrition challenge. Question here is, have you ever wondered why we eat the way we do? Like, why do we choose certain foods over others? I know the instinctive response would be that it is taste, but it's really not just about taste. When a person is, what a person is exposed to while growing up will affect the person's choice of food as an adult. Something for parents of young children out there to think about. So life cause factors such as social factors, environmental influences, religion, etc., they affect food choice much more than personal preference. So the personal food system is actually at the bottom of the scale, and taste is just one function of the personal food system. So other things such as how convenient things are, how much they cost, are also factors that influence what one eats. And once food habits are established, they are really very difficult to change. If you have young children, if you have worked with teenagers, you will find a lot of them, I don't eat this, I don't eat that. And getting them to try certain things can be quite challenging. For most of our Singaporean athletes, and as well as our athlete here, food preparation skills are very limited, and food variety, the variety of food that they consume is also quite limited. So what we did for our athletes, of course, we taught her some kitchen skills, and then I got her to do a food variety challenge. Basically, I just got my athlete to try different types of carbohydrate and come back and share with me on their how they felt it tasted and what was their preference. The idea is just to get the athlete to try it in the first place. So that's why it's called a challenge. And we wanted to upskill our athlete in terms of their kitchen and food prep skills. I find that the kitchen and food preparation skills are really very underrated here in Singapore, simply because we have a lot of domestic helpers to help us prepare things when we are growing up, and food is very easily available from hawker centers, coffee shops, and things like that. But knowing how to cook is not just, you know, to become a domestic goddess or whatever, but it is really to liberate an athlete from the limitations and the helplessness around food intake. And you give them the ability to control what enters their body. So if you compare a Western athlete, for example, or simply an athlete now who's not Singaporean, you'll find that they have much more independence compared to our Singaporean athletes who relies on others for food lah. So I think this independence is important and should be inculcated. We should try to grow this independence among our athletes. And the road ahead. Before I end, I'll just like to share my favorite quote. And my favorite quote is, experience is not what happens to you, it is what you do with what happens to you. Just because I have been through SARS as an adult doesn't mean I'm any wiser when handling COVID. Similarly, I find that this athlete, she really embraced the challenges that were thrown at her, and I find that she has matured a lot in the last few months. And then she is responding to every challenge with gusto and hitting back at the challenges lah. She has demonstrated a lot of resilience, humility, and tenacity that is really needed to flourish in our unpredictable future. For the sports science team that's been helping this athlete, I think we have all learned a lot as well from working together as a team and experiencing for ourselves the power of strength through teamwork. So I hope that this quote will resonate with you. So with that, I've come to the end of my presentation, and thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Thanks, Liyan, for the insightful sharing. I certainly like your statement on liberating the athlete from limitation and helplessness around food intake and give the ability to control what enters the body. That's a great statement. I can't agree more with this statement. It's perfect statement. I see there's a few people can start, asking questions in the Q&A box below. I'm pretty sure that you'll be excited to answer those. I have a question for you, Liyan. And again, thank you for sharing. I think it was a really, really interesting topic. And many athletes, aesthetic athletes will be wondering, coaches will be wondering how to manage, similar situation like this. So the question I have is, you mentioned, you have shared that life cause factors have greater influence on food choices than the personal food factors. So could you share with us some strategies you have used to tackle LEA issues due to life cause factor?
Thanks for the question, Parim.
Welcome.
I think the causes of LEA can be very multifactorial. So like I mentioned, the causes of LEA could be sociological factors or contributed by external factors lah. Internal factors, food fussiness could be, or just lack of time to eat. But I find that food preference is not a major contributor to LEA. It's more of the external factors, the triggers and things like that. But I find that being more open to food, to trying new foods, definitely helps with managing energy intake, because if you can find foods that you really enjoy and establishing a new relationship with food, it helps with the negative emotions and relations that some of our aesthetic athletes have around food. So working with them to establish a positive relationship with food could be just, the food variety challenge, getting them to try different things and then getting them to reflect on how much they enjoy it, how the food makes them feel, can improve their overall relationship with food, which I think is important.
I think it's a great advice that you have given. Building relationship with the food. Not many people will think about that. They will just watch TV and eat their food without having any relationship with the food. So that's I think that's a really great answer. We have a question for you. What would you suggest shooting athletes regarding nutrition before competition and training? I hear that high-fat food make them sluggish. Please advise. This is from Anne.
Thanks for the question, Anne. We usually generally don't quite encourage high-fat foods prior to competition or training. And the main reason is because high-fat foods take quite long to digest. And when we eat food enters into our gut, the amount of fat actually interferes with how fast this food is being digested and emptied into the bloodstream. So a meal that is high in fat will slow down digestion, and you might feel like constantly wanting to burp. And then if all your blood is concentrated at your stomach, trying to digest everything, then you can expect that there's less blood going around your body, around your brain, which is needed for concentration and other limbs and for your reaction. So most of the time for mental sports or attention sports such as shooting, we would recommend a moderate carbohydrate meal, moderate to slow release, such that you get a sustained energy release from the tummy, and not too high fat because you don't want too much blood to go into your stomach for the digestion. I hope that answers.
Well, that definitely answered the question. That's great. I'm still waiting for more questions to come in, but I have another question for you. You talked about multidisciplinary, working with other sports science and coaches, and the causes of LEA is really multifactorial as well. Maybe you'd like to share with us some of the working relationship with the coaches and sports scientists you had in dealing with issues with athletes.
Oh yeah, definitely the coaches influence around food intake is extremely important. If we tell athletes that, oh, you should be eating like that, or a certain way before a competition or before training, but the coach does not agree, or the coach gives a contradictory statement, for either because maybe the background of the coach from different cultures and things like that, or just by not understanding the foods in Singapore, then it will confuse the athlete. So in my experience, usually when I work with an athlete, I also work with the coach. So especially for our non-Singaporean coach, I I introduce them to our food culture. So I once had a coach who mentioned that if I write economy rice as an option, it's like very limited. But maybe for the coaches who are not acquainted with our food culture, economy rice is actually a large variety of food, but from one stall. So these are the very basic things that sometimes I will discuss with the coaches, just to let them know our food culture. Yeah. So for other disciplines, I find, especially when dealing with aesthetic athletes, the psychologist is very important. So sometimes, regardless of how many times I say one thing, I could say maybe crackers, low-fat crackers are very good for a pre-training snack. But if the athlete has got a mental barrier around it, the psychologist can definitely help in trying to further understand why is it that this athlete has got this mental model against crackers, for example. So sometimes I find that when I meet a roadblock, then it's very important to bounce ideas off with other sports scientists, just so that you can find another way, another entry to the athlete.
Yeah. All right, great. So working with other sports scientists, delivering the same message, everyone delivering the same message and encouraging the athlete, to follow the right pathway will be the right approach, as what you mentioned. So it's great. We will like to ask more questions, but I'll take that off from here. And unfortunately, we need to go to our next speaker. Before that, another 5 minutes. Thank you, Liyan, so much for being with us and sharing the topic. And please, everyone, there's a feedback QR code will be shown after this. And do give us our feedback about Liyan's talk. Scan the QR code. I greatly appreciate that. We will start our next talk in 5 minutes time. Thanks, Liyan. See you again.